What's going on, guys? It's Joe back again talking about the Kansas State Wildcats, and in today's video we're going to touch on the transfer portal and a couple of players on the move, and they are all from West Virginia. We've got 3 guys in the portal entering today that are all big names that could end up in Manhattan. And before I get to why they're in the portal, I mean, you probably more than likely already know what's going on in West Virginia. Bob Huggins is out. He resigned after a DUI arrest in Pittsburgh. And either way, while I don't want to be the guy that says we're going to capitalize off the situation, these players are more than likely on the move. The majority of that roster I could see leaving very, very soon. And especially if they're not going to hire somebody, I think every day that gets closer, we're going to see more and more guys hit the portal. We've got 3 guys in the portal right now. And I know that everyone wants to mention, okay, Raekwon Battle, come to K-State. Jesse Edwards, come back to K-State. What's going to happen here? I think we should have an answer on those guys in the next 24 to 48 hours. And while we don't right now, I don't know what's going to happen. My only inclination that said Raekwon Battle may stay is based off the fact that some NIL collectives have really been stepping up to try to keep him there. That's the only thing I can think of, but there are conflicting reports saying they should have a decision depending on who the next head coach is. We'll have to see what happens there. I think both guys could be potential targets for K-State, but we've got 3 dudes for sure in the portal we're going to talk about today in Tre Mitchell, Kerr Kriisa, and Joe Toussaint. Now, to start things off, we're going to start with Tre Mitchell. We're going to roll our way through there. Tre Mitchell, I'll read you some of his stats here and some of his stuff last season. He was one of their best players. You had Eric Stevenson. He was kind of the headliner for that group. Michi Johnson was also there. Tre Mitchell's the next guy. He's a 6'9", 6'10" forward. He plays kind of more like a 3-and-D forward, if that makes any type of sense. He is a physical presence down low, but he definitely has some of that stretch big game to him. He's not as much of a physically dominating presence. I mean, he did post up at times last season, but for the majority of stuff, like, he spread the floor out really well, which I think could actually play well at K-State. But the immediate concern is how he'd work into the rotation with Naquan Talman on the court, and I'll give you my thoughts on that here in a second. But I want to take a look at his 247 Sports, talking about the player he was coming out of high school versus now. We've done that in the past, so starting off here with Evan Daniels, he's the director of basketball recruiting, and he talked about Mitchell saying he's a thick, burly center prospect, below the rim player with a fairly impressive skill set. Mitchell has very good hands and nice touch around the basket. He can score in the post with hook shots over either shoulder and is also capable of stretching the floor with his jump shot from mid-range out to 3. He needs to get in better shape at this stage, and he struggles scoring over size and length. He's tracking as a productive 4-year player. I believe a lot of this is accurate, and I still think a lot of this is pretty accurate, semi-accurate to say the least. He didn't necessarily put on much weight. He's still a kind of a taller, thin guy, but he is able to score in that low block. I do think there's some guys that give him troubles. I mean, Talman was tough for his length, but he still put up, 20 points against Kansas. I think he's got some of that athleticism that you can see, but there are players in the Big 12, like you'd struggle against Oklahoma State with Moses Cisse. There's some dudes that can really square away with this guy. I still think he's an unbelievable asset, and K-State has reached out to him. Now, when I say reached out to him, I'm not entirely sure what that means beyond just, hey, maybe field a call, see where he's at, send him a DM, send something, get in contact with his people, let's see where he's at. There's been conversations around K-State saying we want an experienced guard, we want a veteran guard who's played a lot of games, and we want a guy who's the next best available, and just an athletic guy. He's not a guard. But he could fit into that category of the best available player. Coming out of high school, he's a 4-star player, top 100, just outside the top 100, 107th nationally, and then the 22nd best center in the country, and the 2nd best player in the state of Pennsylvania. He provides a lot. I mean, he's been in college basketball for a long time. He's an experienced guy. Last season, he averaged 11.7 points, 5.5 rebounds, 1.8 assists on 47% shooting. Now, the thing that I think is really important to note with Mitchell, he does fit that Naquan Talman role. He's a 4. He's not a 5. You can't really slot him as a 5 and make him play in the low block. But I think there's an argument to be said of how would this fit work? How would it work with Naquan Talman? There's people saying, well, he wouldn't start over Talman, which I agree with. But he could start next to Talman and kind of just run a similar, like, our 4s and 5s are going to have to be interchangeable if we have a guy like Tre Mitchell come to town. I don't know what the likelihood is. There's a lot of people pegging him to go to Kentucky. I also don't know if I love that, to say the least. If you saw the story the other night from the NBA draft, John Calipari forgot one of his players was getting drafted and left after the first guy was taken off the board. That's not a great timing. That's not great timing if you want to get a guy in the transfer portal like Tre Mitchell. It's kind of a bad situation. We'll see what happens there. I think he could go to K-State, and I'd be thrilled with the pick. He is a dude. Like, he's a certified dude. He's an athlete in the low post. And the biggest thing that impresses me, like, he can shoot. He can shoot really well as a big guy. I mean, he's got a great shooting motion. He's got a lot to like. I mean, that's the biggest thing for him. I think he'd be a good fit, but I don't know how that rotation would work yet. But I'm not saying I'm a doubter. I am still a believer on that. I know K-State has reached out, but we'll see how that plays out from here on out. Moving on. Now, Kerr Kriisa. I know that there's a lot of people that feel some type of way about Kerr Kriisa. He's one of those guys that gets kind of that negative backlash like a JJ Redick type player. I don't know if I want to buy all that and deal with all that, but I do know this. Coming out of high school, he was the best recruit of the 3 athletes. He's a 95 on 247 Sports. He's the 69th nationally in the class, I believe, of 2020, 2021, somewhere around there. The 12th best point guard, and then obviously he's an international guy, but the 12th best point guard in his class, and he's got a lot to like. This is what Josh Gerson had to say. We've talked about him a little bit. He pegs him as a Power 5 starter, which obviously came true. Skilled point guard with good size and average length. Plenty of room to fill into his frame. Very good three-point shooter. Off bounce who can hit tough contested shots. He could improve efficiency off the catch and middle game, which I think he has, to say the least, if you've watched some of his highlights. He can finish with both hands at the rim. He's got outstanding vision, and he's a creative passer. Ambidextrous one-hand passer off the live dribble, which I absolutely love. Competitive spirit and motor help overcome physical tools on defense. Projected as a high major starter. I talked myself into Kriisa a little bit, to say the least. He's a good player, man. He played at Arizona, then transfers to West Virginia in the portal. West Virginia obviously has their situation, and he re-enters the portal saying, you know what, I got to go somewhere else. I think there's a good fit with K-State here. I do know that there might be some culture issues, and that's something to figure out. I can't really peg him as a K-State guy immediately because there's not enough to go off of yet. I can honestly see him even returning to Arizona at this point. We'll see what happens with that. But I do think he's going to be a good player wherever he does end up. He's got a lot to like. He's a great shooter. And I talked about it in the video of what K-State needs to do to win a national championship, what we're looking for in the portal. He fits one of the roles to a T of what type of player I'd want. A guy who can shoot, create his own shot, facilitate in the passing game, and he's a senior guard. He'd be a good fit in Manhattan. And if nothing else, I think there should be some calls from K-State, from Jerome, Tang, and the coaching staff. He could fit in just about everywhere. He's 6'2". He's a point guard, pure point guard. I think he's a competitive guy that I would really like his moxie on the court. And I don't know officially if he's going to be interested in K-State, but he provides a lot of like veteran, go compete type of guy. You know, he can get out there and go on ball, off ball, whatever he needs to do. At Arizona, he spent more time as the on ball guy, but he also played off ball and was really good in transition as a shooter. He really has a lot of Caleb Grill in his game, which I don't know how you feel about that as a Big 12 fan. But I like where the kid's at. I think it'll be up and down if he does. I think more than likely he'll probably go somewhere Big East related. But if he's in the portal, it's at least worth the call. It's at least worth fielding. At Arizona last season, he averaged 9.9 points a game, 2.4 rebounds, and 5.1 assists on 37% from the field. The biggest thing to note, he's a competitor, and I love what he could do off ball. I don't need him to dominate the game in that sense of, you have to facilitate. Tyler Perry's still your on-ball guy. He's still your point guard no matter what, even if Kerr Kriisa comes to town. It's just a matter of, would he start over Cam Carter? Would he be our two guard going off ball? Or would he come into as a rotation guy? That's still up in the air. I think there's a lot of potential there, and I'd love to see him in Manhattan, actually. I know a lot of people are hit or miss on Kriisa, but I think he'd be a good fit with K-State, and I know that he's going to be a big talking point here in a bit. Moving on, our last player, we've got Joe Toussaint. Now, there's been a little bit of rumbling about Joe Toussaint. This is another guy that I think could really, really, really fit well in Manhattan. Of the three players, I don't know that I'd say I'd prefer him over Kerr Kriisa, but he fits a different role than a lot of the guards on the transfer portal. He's just a competitive dude to the point where he's going to defend you sideline to sideline. He's not going to let you hide. He's going to go after you. The dude is a good player, 6 foot tall, so he's not the biggest dude in the world. He's a competitor. He's a physical specimen. Like, the guy goes after you either way. I know he's not gigantic on the court, but he plays bigger than he is, and you saw that in the K-State game last season. He went after Marquise Noel, and obviously Keese is a good enough defender to rise to that challenge, but he still wasn't giving up. I mean, he wasn't shying away from anybody. He's a good, skilled passer. I mean, he scores pretty efficiently, to say the least. 9.4 points a game last season, 2.8 rebounds per game, 2.6 assists per game, and then 37% from the field. He's also a pretty skilled player overall. I mean, he's gotten better each season. I think that's the biggest thing, is every season he's been on the court, he's developed. He did get his degree from West Virginia, so even though he's transferred in the past, he's eligible immediately as a grad transfer to go elsewhere. I think he could fit in really well at K-State, but I don't know what the situation is there. I think it'd be worth filling a call to see what happens if Jesse Edwards enters the portal, Raekwon Battle enters the portal. And I'm not saying these three aren't worth a spot. 100%. If any of the three are interested in K-State, they are worth a roster spot from K-State. We've got 2 open scholarships right now, but I do think each of these three guys would be a good fit in Manhattan. And I know there's going to be a lot in the next couple of days about West Virginia basketball and who's transferring in, who's moving on, what's happening. I would say this. I wouldn't toss 2 spots to these guys and then not have insurance for the event that Jesse Edwards hit the portal, or the event that Raekwon Battle hits the portal. That being said, guys, that's going to do it for the video. I really appreciate you guys listening and watching some of these videos. I didn't mention it at the start, but if you're interested in more videos, go ahead and consider subscribing. We're giving away a lavender quarter zip at 1,000 subs, and it will be incredible, and it might be the best thing you ever wear. It's a beautiful piece of clothing, and I love mine to death, so go ahead and consider subscribing. Other than that, guys, I hope you have an absolute wonderful day, and go Cats.